sound. But after all, I'm a Negro Baptist preacher, you know. Nobody can control a Negro Baptist preacher. Even God sometimes can. But nevertheless, I will try to make them like a woman's skirts, long enough to be respectable, but short enough to be interesting.
Adam Clayton Powell, Jr. was the pastor of America's largest Protestant congregation, a seminal leader in the fight for racial justice, and a U.S. congressman. As a minister, he preferred nightclubs to prayer groups. His political career was dogged by accusations of financial chicanery and neglect of duty, and his motives were often in dispute. But by 1965, he had become the most powerful black man in American political history.
The white liberal was monopolizing the Negro's civil rights fight.
That's right. It was Clay's thing. Clay's thing.
And he was allowing into his cartel, his monopoly, only those Negro liberals who would get along with him.
I like the way he thumbed his nose at white folks. Now, I tell you, that spoke to my heart. See, if you've had the black experience in America, it would speak to you.
He was saying things that we had not dared to think. The tone of his speech was one of real defiance, of real anger. It was scary what he was saying, but it was also exhilarating to hear him.
But we know, oh, we know that we are the children of God. And there is a God who rules above with a hand of power and a heart of love. And if I'm right, thank God I'm right. He'll fight my battle, and I'll be free someday. Therefore, stand together, children. Walk together, children. Fight together, children. Work together, children. Work together, children. Go together. Walk together, children. Don't you get weary. Great camp meet in the promised land.
But once in a lifetime, a man like that comes along. Once in a lifetime.
Yes. The one in a million, once in a lifetime, Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Why celebrate him? Because his birthday was this week. This would have been his 115th birthday. November 29th, 1908 was the birthday of one of the greatest civil rights leaders of the 20th century. As you heard him say, he was a Baptist pastor. You know, he was a preacher. And that really helped draw so many people. That call and response type cadence that those preachers used, you know, that really is so enticing to the public. And he was so charismatic, unbelievably charismatic, that, you know, he was able to essentially he was almost like a black Huey Long in a lot of ways. He was a black populist type figure, who was so charismatic. There was such a sort of personality that sort of drew you towards Adam Clayton Powell Jr. You know, he represented Harlem in New York City, which was the home of the Harlem Renaissance, and so much black empowerment during the first half, especially the first half of the 20th century. You know, this man was the first black man to be elected to Congress from New York. You know, before Shirley Chisholm, it was Adam Clayton Powell. And he was the first from the Northeast, period. You know, people forget that before the black codes and Jim Crow, during Reconstruction, there were lots of black Congress people. There was a black governor in Louisiana during the 1870s, which is why you saw the Ku Klux Klan and the American government and the White Citizens Council, and all these people got together to make sure that they couldn't be the type of black power in this country that there was at that time, and we haven't recovered since. You know, we have not recovered since. You know, we had a black governor in 1875 and didn't have another one until 1990. You know, thanks to Jim Crow, thanks to the black codes, and somebody like Adam Clayton Powell was so ballsy in how he did things. He would find the segregationist senators in Congress, and he would go and eat lunch right next to them. He purposely would seek out people who didn't like black people, and the people in Congress who didn't like black people, and go sit next to him at the lunch table. That's who he was. That's who he was. He was a national spokesman on civil rights and social issues, obviously. But I think one of the more underrated parts of his legacy was his support. He sort of supported the newly independent African and Asian countries that had started to get free, and Latin American countries that started to get free from colonialism. You know, and that was an important stance for him to take. He supported these countries in the 1960s becoming free. He urged the United States, he urged presidents, he urged Kennedy and Johnson to support the emergent countries in Africa and Asia while they were getting free from colonialism. You know, this was a man who was the chairman of the Education and Labor Committee. That was the most powerful position ever held by a black person in Congress. You know, he helped usher through the passage of the Civil Rights legislation under Kennedy and Johnson. Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, all the New Deal, not the New Deal, the Great Society legislation that cut black poverty in half during the 1960s. He was a part of that. You know, he was such a galvanizing figure. You know, and one thing that I've noticed about the historically great black politicians and politicians in general during the mid to late 20th century, we just talked about Shirley Chisholm earlier. They all focused on class. You know, for them, there was no choosing between race and class. It's race and class. And so he didn't just fight for a few token blacks, you know, to get put in high places. Like a lot of black people now are just happy to see Kamala Harris being trotted out to be sort of a puppet or a muppet for the Biden administration while she bides her time to try to get in the White House herself. That wasn't Adam Clayton Powell. You know, he was fighting for jobs and affordable housing for black folks. He was the chairman of the Coordinating Committee for Employment. He used that power to organize the black community and bring political pressure on businesses. He said, you're going to hire black people at professional levels. He said, you're going to hire black people. He organized mass meetings, rent strikes, boycotts, and public campaigns to force companies, utilities. He forced the Harlem Hospital to hire black people. Now think about that. You would think that Harlem's hospital would have black people in it because it's in Harlem, but no. He had to force Harlem Hospital to hire black people. You know, at skilled positions, not just, you know, janitors. You know, during the 1939 World's Fair, New York's World Fair, he organized a picket line at the offices of the World Fair at the Empire State Building. He said, you're going to hire black people. You're going to hire black people. And that pressure almost quadrupled the amount of black people who were hired during that World's Fair. He led a bus boycott many years before Martin Luther King's, Montgomery bus boycott in the mid-50s. Adam Clayton Powell led a bus boycott in Harlem in 1941. 1941. That's really 14 years before King got really started in 55. Became a very prominent figure. He led that bus boycott because he said, look, this is Harlem. We're the majority of the passengers, but y'all not hiring any black people to drive the bus. He forced them to hire hundreds of black workers. Drugstores that didn't hire black people in Harlem. He forced them to hire black pharmacists. I mean, it sounds so ridiculous that we have to think about that now. It sounds ridiculous to think about it in 2023 because I see black pharmacists all the time. But he had to literally fight and kick down the door for drugstores in Harlem. Not on Park Avenue, but operating in Harlem to hire black pharmacists. And he said to the black community, you guys only shop where they hire black people. If they don't hire black people, don't shop there. Man, if only black people had that much sense. Nah. So many black folks today don't have that common sense. I don't know how many times we got to hear about famous black people who don't get recognized in one of these bougie boutiques or one of these bougie stores. And they don't know it's Oprah, or they don't know it's some rapper. They don't know it's Jay-Z, or they don't know it's some guy. And they end up racially profiling them because they don't know it's this person. Well, you wouldn't have that problem if you went to a store where they hired black people. I'm not trying to buy clothes somewhere there ain't going to be no black people. I'm not trying to buy food someplace that won't hire black people. Get that. So this man in the 1940s was running for Congress on a platform of civil rights. Fair employment practices, like we just talked about, a ban on poll taxes and lynching. And it's insane to me sitting here in late 2023, December of 2023, going into 2024, thinking that was considered a radical platform. Like, oh my God, you mean you want to ban lynching? Oh my, how dare you? You're practically a communist. And poll taxes, which were used by southern states to keep black people and some poor white people, to be fair, from voting and exclude them from politics. Like I said, he really took his fight for integration and fairness more than anything anywhere to Congress. I told you he used to purposely find the segregationists and eat lunch with them. He purposely would use the facilities on Capitol Hill that were reserved for white members only. And so he would use the bathrobes that were meant for white people only. He would take black constituents to dine with him at the whites-only House of Representatives restaurant. He was a provocateur. He was somebody who used his position to fight for his people, to accumulate concessions for black people. Now, if you say that, black people look at you like you're crazy. I say, well, if they're not going to talk about reparations, if they're not going to talk about ending the war on drugs in the prison industrial complex, which has done more to destroy our community than anything since slavery, then let's not vote for them. Oh, that's balderdash. How dare you say that? How dare you expect to get something for your vote? How dare you? You know, it's funny, Dr. Umar just said something about this the other day, and I was right there with him when he said it, but you know, he said something just about this very recently. Let me see if
people in America never get anything when they vote. So how do they motivate us to vote if we never get nothing when we do? Fear. Black people are the only constituency in this country who vote out of fear. In other words, I'm not voting to stop police brutality because they're not going to stop it. I'm not voting to change mass incarceration. They're not going to change it. I'm not voting to fix the schools. They're never going to fix them. So what you voting for? Because I'm afraid of what Trump might do. You see that? That's how we vote. Fear. Now, when the Jews go to the polls, when the Latinos go to the polls, when the Arabs, the East Indians, the Anglo-Saxons go to the polls, they're going for concessions. I'm getting something out of this vote. I'm getting something that we already agreed upon before election day. Black people are getting nothing. We vote out of fear. Our motivation is fear. Joe Biden may do nothing for you, but Donald Trump will be worse. See how that works? This is how they get us out. The black man is the only one in the voting line voting because he's scared of what the other man might do to him.
Boom. Boom. And that's why Adam Clayton Powell was great back in the 1940s, you know, because back then black people expected their elected officials to actually do things for them, not just be a little less worse than the Republicans. You know. You know, he was known for the Powell amendments. Adam Clayton Powell was. You know, on bills that propose federal expenditures, he would essentially say, look, federal funds should not be used for any jurisdiction that maintains segregation. If you are locking black people out of jobs, of education, of healthcare, whatever, you are not getting no federal funds. The Powell amendments, that right there was integrated into the Civil Rights Act of 1964. You wouldn't have that without Adam Clayton Powell Jr. And again, just goes back to what Dr. Umar was saying right here. This man was a free man. Adam Clayton Powell Jr. was a free man. He actually supported a Republican, Dwight D. Eisenhower, in 1956. Because Dwight D. Eisenhower was running on the civil rights platform. Why? Because, again, they were actually competing for black votes. The Republicans and the Democrats were competing for black votes. So in the 1950s, Eisenhower was the one integrating schools in Little Rock, Arkansas, and forcing black, you know, using the military to protect black kids who were trying to integrate schools. That was the Republican in that case. And so when the Democrats were too weak to stand up for civil rights, he said, look, I'll just support the Republican. Now tell me that there's a Democrat who is independent and has the courage to not vote, to not openly not support the Democratic candidate for president because they are weak. Not a single one. Even the squad with AOC and Ilhan Omar and all these other people, they will always say, well, you know, we can't have Trump, or we can't have the Republicans. None of them will ever look at Cornel West or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or now Jill Stein's running again. They will not look at anybody else. They will do it exactly whatever the party tells them, even if what the party is telling them is completely toxic and destructive to their own communities. You know, that's what I talk about, political courage. Men like Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Every week on this show, I encourage us to have political courage, to fight for what is right, regardless of what a party says. Democrat, Republican, I don't care what you are. You either fighting, you're on the right side of the class war or you're not. One or the other. You're on the right side of justice or you're not. I'm not going to support no party that's on the wrong side of justice just because the other people on the wrong side of justice, of injustice. They on the side of injustice, but I'm going to be on even more on the side of injustice just because the people who wear the same colors as me say, well, yeah, we're on the side of injustice, but hey, the other party's even more unjust. Nah, that's not who Adam Clayton Powell Jr. was. That's not who he was. You know, he fought to raise the minimum wage. He fought for Medicaid. A lot of people don't know that. Adam Clayton Powell is the one who fought for Medicaid in the early 60s, long before Johnson implemented it. He expanded the minimum wage when he was the chairman of the House Committee on Education and Labor. He expanded the minimum wage to include retail workers. Think about that. Most of the workers today are retail workers working in Walmart. Walmart and Amazon are the biggest employers in the country, so I think Walmart is number 2 if I'm not mistaken. Those people wouldn't even been eligible for a minimum wage. And he worked for equal pay for women. He supported education and training for deaf and disabled people, nursing education, vocational training. He led legislation for standards for wages and work hours and aid for elementary and secondary education and school libraries. You know, and if that's not enough, his wife, Hazel Scott, I actually did a tribute to her during when I was doing the Counterpoint segment. I did a tribute to her because she is actually the first black person to have a TV show in America. Hazel Scott. She was a pianist and a singer. And her and her husband, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., they were like, I guess, the Beyonce and Jay-Z of civil rights. You know, she ended up ruining her career fighting for her people. She lost her TV show. She lost so many of her gigs. Harry Truman, who was the president of the United States, banned her from performing at Constitutional Hall because of her stances on civil rights. That's why I talk about courage. You guys have been groomed and beaten down to be pragmatic. Well, they ain't never going to fix the schools. They ain't never going to stop police brutality. They ain't never going to end mass incarceration. They ain't never going to give us reparations. So we better just be pragmatic and just hope we don't die. You see anybody else voting like that? You see anybody else talking like that? I don't think so. All right, folks. Just want to send a happy birthday out, 115th birthday out to one of the greatest men in American history, Mr. Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Happy to him. All respect to him. He was the epitome of political courage. I hope a lot of you out there were listening. Okay, folks, it is 7:42 in the p.m. on December 1st, 2023. That means it is World AIDS Day. When we get back, we are going to talk about the Slim Slow, the Slim Reaper. You know, a disease that's killed many people, especially here in the black community, on this World AIDS Day. We'll be right back after this.